It's time for the Money Puzzle Podcast. With good conversations and realistic solutions to the money puzzles we all face every day. I'm your host, financial advisor, chartered financial consultant, and president of Eryn Insurance and Financial, Robert Eryn. Now let's get this show started. Hello and welcome to the Money Puzzle Podcast. I am chartered financial consultant Robert Eryn, and I'll be your guide for the ride for the next few minutes. Each week, we look at a different piece of the money puzzle and practical ways to solve it so you can have the financial confidence you deserve and the future that you dream of. We're doing a special interview, a personal story with Eryn, who has a lot to share and a great story to share with everyone about her and her husband, Adam, her new husband, Adam, because Eryn is just 24 years old, and what her and her husband have been through is a lot, more than what most people should go through in a lifetime. So we're going to be skipping the news and skipping over some of the other parts of the show in order to spend our time with Eryn and listening to her personal story about why everyone needs life insurance regardless of your age. Let's take a look. Hey everybody, I have with me in the studio today, Eryn. Eryn, thank you for joining us in the studio.
Of course.
Eryn actually works for me. She started working here back in April, and it wasn't long after that there was some medical stuff that was going on in Eryn's life that we've worked through, and we've kind of experienced with you in a very small part of what Eryn, you and your husband go through all the time.
Yes.
But Eryn came and said, hey, it's Life Insurance Awareness Month, and I have a story to tell, which you really do have
quite the story to tell.
A pretty good story to tell. So you've been with me a little bit of time, but do me and do all of us a favor. Kind of give me the story of you and your husband, Adam.
Absolutely. So we met 2.5 years ago at Anchor's Bar in Fountain, Colorado. And we immediately had this connection. And so we were with each other all the time. My family thought I was crazy that I moved in with him 2.5 weeks after we met.
2.5 weeks?
Yes.
Well, that is a little crazy,
Just
speaking as a parent. But it's worked out.
Yeah, it worked out great. And so we were always out doing things. We were at the park with our dogs, going hiking. And we went on a few vacations, and all that started to change. June 2018, he got really sick. He started feeling sick to his stomach, and I didn't think anything of it. We decided to go through the VA because everything is essentially paid for through his disability. So they had done a few scans, and they realized he had a neuroendocrine tumor mass on the tail end of his pancreas.
Okay. And that was in June of last year?
So he started feeling sick. They finally diagnosed him in November.
November of 18. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So they...
Do you mind if I ask, how old was Adam when this happened?
29.
He was 29. Okay.
I'm 24. He's 29. So there's a little age difference.
Just a little. Yeah.
Not too bad.
No.
So we went through the VA, and they finally did the surgery March 4th. And it did not go very well at all. So we were told it would be a 2 to 5 day hospital stay with a laparoscopic surgery. And about 3 hours in, the doctor had come out and they said they had to open him completely up and they had to take his spleen. So he was cut from the bottom of his sternum all the way down to below his belly button. And so he woke up in ICU, and that just started our long journey where we're at now. So they kept him in ICU, and on the 4th day, he started throwing up, just nonstop, throwing up. I remember him crying and saying, something's wrong. So they ended up having to put a NG tube in, and what that is, essentially, they put it through his nose and down into his stomach, and that sucks everything that's not going through his body out, so then he feels better. And that night, I remember going over to him to kiss him goodnight, and he said, I felt really hot. And so I took the blankets off, didn't think anything of it, and the doctors actually came in, checked his temperature, and asked me to leave the room, and he had 106 fever.
106.
106.
Now, you guys were not married at the time.
We were not.
Yeah.
No.
So is that why they asked you to leave the room, or?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was so frustrating because I wanted to be there the whole time. You know, I'm the only one up there in Denver with him, and they would make me leave the room. So it was just frustrating that I couldn't be part of that, which in a way it was kind of good that I left the room because when I came back, he was hooked up to even more machines. They had hooked him up to a ice blanket, what they call. So they wrapped his entire body in an ice blanket to cool him down.
Mm-hmm.
So it was good, but he was so out of it. I mean, when your body temperature gets that high, it was scary because you can suffer brain damage.
Right.
You can go through a lot more complications. So they didn't know what caused it, and they moved him out of ICU a few days later, and he just kept feeling sick. Well, they ended up discharging us, and when I met you, we were going through this phase of going in and out of the hospital every week. We'd go up to Denver and get discharged, and then back and forth, and so finally we decided to switch him out of the VA to Memorial Central in Colorado Springs. And that ended up being the best decision we ever made because they have one of the best trauma surgeons that I've ever met, and we have a lot of respect for them. And we went to the ER here in the Springs, and they discharged him 3 times, unfortunately, before they actually kept him. And when they kept him, they realized he was actually septic. So when I saw
That's a very
you,
scary thing.
Yeah, and when I saw you, you were wondering why I was crying, and I was like, I gotta go. And that was probably the worst moment of my life because when you hear those words, you think, wow, this is really bad. We're not sure how this is going to turn out. And so I went to the hospital with him. They'd already moved him from a regular room to ICU. And I just remember sitting there and he was crying and I was crying because we had no idea what was going to happen. And so we actually flew his mom in, who's never been on a plane before. So that was interesting. But we had all of our family come in, and the surgeon came in, and she, gave us the best case scenario and the worst case scenario. And she said, unfortunately, I don't know if he can wake up tomorrow because your body has already been through so much trauma. We don't know how much you can handle this. So we went through the surgery, and I was sitting in the waiting room, and she came out and told me that they had to remove more pancreatic tissue because it was dead. But luckily, and I think this is only through the grace of God, the other organs were not dead. So that was a relief. But sitting in the waiting room, I couldn't help but think, what are we going to do? We don't have a life insurance policy, and I'm terrified because how am I supposed to pay for funeral expenses? And that was a conversation we had the night prior of, us being emotional, but also the guilt that he had on his part of, I don't have anything for you. I love you, but I don't have anything for you to pay the mortgage and to, bury me and give me a proper funeral. And it was just so many emotions and so much stress that could have been avoided if we knew that we'd be okay having a life insurance policy.
That's probably, so you're dealing with, you've got this surgery that's coming up, and that emotional and all of the, the best case and the worst case, which I would imagine the worst case was probably pretty bad.
Yeah.
Then on top of that, you're having to have conversations of Adam feeling guilty. And I'm sorry that I didn't do these things. Yeah. And of course, he never knew that any of this was going to come up in his life.
Exactly.
And what started off as, it's not good, we found this tumor, it's going to be, but you know what, it's benign, right?
Yeah. We were told they would remove it, but they also had told us it would be laparoscopic, which is completely different than being open up completely.
Open. But then it turned into, now it's been months and months and months of ongoing complications.
Yeah, so the reason he ended up being septic is they call it a pancreatic leak, and that happens, it's kind of it's not rare, but it can happen after surgeries with pancreas. So his pancreas kept leaking, and that they said it's due to just his anatomy. It's complicated, so I feel bad for him, but because it kept leaking, what they have to do is to avoid another abscess, which is what was making him sick, just a fluid collection. they have to put a stent in. So right now we're doing the stent changes every 2 to 4 weeks. So every 2 to 4 weeks he has to go in and they put sometimes they're long, sometimes they're small, stents to help make sure that there isn't a blockage and that the leak is actually going out of his body as opposed to staying in.
Now, when they do these, they have to put them under?
Yeah. Which is scary because, I think it's more of being traumatized from the original surgery that Adam and I are always scared of, okay, I'm going to kiss you goodbye, and it's, okay, is this really goodbye, or I'll see you in a few hours, and it's just hard because you never know with him in general. He always surprises me, sometimes in a good way and sometimes in a bad way, so, yeah.
So since I've met you, which you started here April 1st.
Yes.
How many, we were kind of talking about, how many times has he been put under? So now we're filming this first week of September.
Yeah.
Right. So we've had all of April, May, June, July. So basically 4 months. And in those 4 months, how many times has he been put under to go through some kind of procedure?
Yeah. So right now, like at the top of my head, I can think of 12. I think there's a lot more because he's had to get like JP drains to help get rid of the leaks, and like I said, every 2 to 4 weeks he's getting stent replacements, so that can go as long as 18 months from now. So This isn't even close to being over. My hope is that now that he's able to go back and go to work, then we're getting better, because when he was really sick, he couldn't go to work.
Which was for a while. I mean, he was out of work for a while, or has been.
Yeah, and I think it was hard because both of us, when we found out he was sick, I ended up resigning from my teaching job in December 2018, and I was like, what am I doing? And ended up being, I needed to, otherwise I couldn't have been there when he was in ICU.
And there was a time when, I mean, after you found out he was septic, right, and went through all of that scare, there was even a short time where, was he in a medically induced coma for a little while?
That was when he was in ICU. Yeah.
Okay.
He's been in ICU twice, so he was hospitalized for 21 days, but 13 days were in ICU, so that was
a lot.
Long time.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys, you had this conversation, and Adam was feeling guilty, which is sad, and I'm sure probably even harder for you to hear or listen to.
It was hard because, one, I'm an emotional person. I've always been emotional, and trying to hide my emotions, because when I'm emotional and he's emotional, it just, we can't get through anything. So he was guilty for the financial reasons, and then also that he's so young and nobody deserves to go through this. And I could care less. I'm like, life just kind of happens, and I'll be here no matter what. But for him, he just felt guilty that we couldn't do all the things that we wanted to do. And
different kind of life.
Yeah, it's a completely different life, and our world was turned upside down. And I don't wish this upon anybody, but I also know that this brought us so much closer together. More so than I ever thought before. But you see someone through their worst times and their best, and I mean, I'm just thankful that he's okay now. I know we still have a long road to go, but I'm hoping that the worst is behind us and we can move on to.
Yeah, because I think was it last week he had to do another stent replacement.
So on Thursday he had to go under again, and it just plays with your emotions. I think that's the biggest, where I say I'm fine, but sometimes it's just, you just have those days where you're like, man, I really am sick of being in the hospital, and he feels the same way.
Yeah, I don't blame either of you. It's a lot of
well, it's a lot of stress and just processing everything, because financially, you're in the hospital all the time, you can't work, and so you're just dealing with it. But
so a little while back, or after one of these procedures, you came and visited with me a little bit about life insurance, right?
So we had one of the scares I haven't mentioned was he went in for a normal stent replacement, and you've heard this story, but I was sitting in the waiting room, and the doctor came out, and he was holding this piece of paper, and he was walking really fast, and I just had this gut feeling something isn't right. And he had told me to come back with him to a room, and he had told me, you need to sign this right now. He's like, there's been a complication, and we're going to need to, we think we're going to need to open him up because the stent got stuck in his pancreas, and he didn't know how he was going to get it out. So it was just okay, are we going through this again? Is this going to be the next long hospital stay? You have a bunch of emotions that run through your mind. And after that, he was fine, thank goodness. I came to you the next morning, and I said, can we get life insurance? And I think it was hard to hear no, because I feel like it was almost too late. But one of the best things you ever told me is it's kind of like buying a parachute. You need to buy it before you need it. And it really put it in a perspective that we didn't expect any of this to happen. Therefore, we weren't prepared for it.
Yeah. And how could you ever expect any of this to happen, right? Mm-hmm. Now, one little thing I'd like to put in there is, at some point in time, and I know when it was, right? But you guys, you had been trying to get married for quite some time, right? You actually you didn't sneak off, but you just had to. But you kind of either snuck him out of the hospital, or he was out for a couple of days.
He was out, yeah. So we that was right after we switched him out of the VA. We went to the courthouse because I knew we weren't getting answers, and I remember coming to you and I asked you, I was like, well, this is advice. Do I go to the Mayo Clinic? I didn't know what to do. So we were running into the problem with the VA of me not being the power of attorney because we weren't married. Mm-hmm. And so we decided to go to the courthouse, and of course, I'm over here like, that's not my dream wedding, but it's fine. So we got married, and it ended up being good just because of all the other complications that happened after.
That's why the doctor was talking to you that morning, because you guys had gotten married.
Yeah, and he had, it was scary because Adam had no idea any of that was happening. So when he woke up, I'm like, it's so good to see you. Yeah.
So you came to me and we talked, and I said, unfortunately, we can't get life insurance for Adam, at least not at this point, because of the ongoing medical things that he's being treated for, not knowing complications. He's not better. Mm-hmm. That's right. And that was a hard conversation. Honestly, I don't like telling people that, and I know it was hard to hear as well. Yeah. Now, did you share that with Adam? Did you guys have that conversation?
Yeah, we had that conversation because he was curious too. I was more curious than he was, but it was again that guilt and of both of us thinking, he's 30 years old, I'm 24. Why would we even think about doing this right now? But the truth is that you have to have life insurance, and we wish that we would have done that sooner. Like I said, we weren't prepared for it, but I wish that we were. So I'm hoping other people can actually prepare and just know we are just like every single young couple out there. We're living life, going on vacations. We went on 2 cruises in 1 year, and then he just got sick all of a sudden. So it can happen at any time.
So it changed your lifestyle.
Yes.
Yep. It's changed your relationship, but for the better.
Yeah.
Which is good. It kind of sped up it kind of slowed down when you were originally going to get married, but you finally did get married. Yes. And then now you've been able to have a real wedding here recently.
We got married September 1st at the Rustic Police Barn. So it was definitely a more emotional day than probably before, just because of everything we've been through, not knowing if that day was going to happen. Yeah. So everyone, my family was crying. It was beautiful, but it was also really emotional.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Adam's had procedures since then.
Yeah, he's had one since then. So we'll have one at the end of the month, and hopefully everything continues to improve and the worst is behind us. We don't have to worry about that anymore.
Yeah. So life lessons, you said you weren't expecting this, right? So what other life lessons, or what life lessons would you like to make sure that people learn from you so that they don't kind of go through these things themselves?
So I would say life insurance is something that everyone should think about at a young age, at my age. Even if you're watching this and you're in high school, I want you to consider that, because the people that mean the most to you need to be taken care of if you're not here. Mm-hmm. And so you don't want them to have the financial burden on top of learning how to live life without you.
Right.
And that's what's so important is just listen to my story and understand that we were not expecting this, and therefore we were not prepared, but it's not too late for other people to prepare.
One of the things that I really learned from even just recently in our conversations together was it really didn't dawn on me that the other person, like if something would have happened, you would have been the person left behind, because Adam's been sick. But it never really dawned on me too much in the 25 years I've been doing this, the guilt that the other individual, when you told me that Adam was feeling guilty, that really struck me. And the fact that he's literally fighting for his life a lot of this time. He's in these medically induced comas and all this stuff. And then he also has to have the guilt of, I don't want to do this to the person that I love.
Yeah. I mean, we got engaged and then we bought our house together. And so when we had everything that happened, I was just thinking, he said it before I actually said it, but how are we going to pay for it? If he's not here, how are we going to pay for our mortgage? And just the guilt on his half of, I know you're going to be missing me, but I don't have anything for you.
Right. And even covering funeral costs, those kinds of things. Which again, why would you be thinking about those when you're 24 years old, falling in love, and planning to get married and buy the house with this guy that you love? Yeah.
It happened so unexpectedly
and fast. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you I know that's a lot. It's a very personal story. And
I'm an open book. But...
So, and I continue to watch you guys go through it and see how strong you have been. Yeah. And I will say I've been just totally impressed that you still, it's like you go get Adam checked into the hospital, and then you come back to work for a while, and then you go back for a while, and you come back. So really, I commend you and I applaud you and Adam both for fighting what you've been through.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. This
Absolutely.
was fun.
So, all right. Thank you for joining us. And again, listen to Eryn's story. I'd like to we'll do a follow-up here in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, whenever Adam is done going through those things. That's right. Maybe we can visit with Adam one of these days. But thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you.
I hope that you got some value out of today's show. If you know any young folks or anyone in general who needs to hear Eryn's story and who needs to think about life insurance for their own personal life and their family, please share this episode with them. You can send them to the YouTube version if they want to watch Eryn and I having this conversation. You can share the podcast from whatever app you listen to. And please, while you're there, give us a rating on both YouTube and the podcast. That helps us out, continue to grow and help others. And if you've got your own personal financial or money question, email it to us at questions@yourmoneypuzzle.com. Until next week, thanks for joining us. Now go out there, be safe, have some fun, and do something to help solve your money puzzle. Your future self will be glad you did. Have a great week.
Registered representative of and securities offered through Securities Management and Research, Inc., SM&R. Member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through BFC Planning, Inc. Edge and Insurance and Financial Services, Johnson Financial Services, SM&R, American National Family of Companies, and BFC Planning are independent entities. There are risks involved with investing which may include market fluctuation and possible loss of principal value. Particular investments may not be suitable for certain situations. Carefully consider the risks and possible consequences involved prior to making an investment decision. Our firm does not provide legal or tax advice. Be sure to consult with your own legal and tax advisors before taking any action that may have tax implications.